Hello, and allow me to welcome you back to this stormy day edition of Remember Books. Today we're going to be going into one of my favorite middle grade series, so big surprise, I never do that. And we're going to be talking about Patricia C. Wrede's Dancing with Dragons. The entire series is actually called the Enchanted Forest Chronicles. There's 4 of them. We have them at Saegertown, so you can go and pick one up, place a hold on it, pick it up in the lobby if you wish. They're extremely fun, and I highly recommend it. Now, these little guys are what we call that fractured fairy tale. And that's a genre that can run the complete gamut from very dark and deconstructed to very lighthearted, sort of like a comfort food book. And I would put these books way at the far end of that comfort food side of the spectrum, which I think is a good thing. I like the dark deconstruction sometimes. I like sometimes using, a fable or a fairy tale to do some like socio commentary, that kind of stuff. But sometimes also I don't really want to think about anything other than like dragon jokes, which these books are full of. They follow our friend Cimarine, this lovely dark-haired lady on the cover, through her journeys as she gets bored with her life and goes to become the housekeeper for a dragon, and then gets married to, I believe, an emperor of some kind, and then their adventures in the magical land that they live in, and then the adventures of their sons. So it's just a good fun time had by all, and I'm going to start this somewhere in the middle of the second chapter because there are more interesting things in it than there are at the beginning. It's a little bit slow to catch up, I would say, about these books. The first couple chapters of at least the beginning of the series, it's a lot of setup. So I'm starting it with the knights who start coming to try and find our friend Cimarine because they don't believe she's willingly at the dragon's house. And they've been led to believe that she needs to be rescued. The first of the knights arrived at the end of the second week. Cimarine was busy cleaning swords. Cajol had been right about their condition. Not only were some of them rusty, but nearly all of them needed sharpening. She was polishing the last flakes of rust from an enormous broadsword when she heard someone calling from the mouth of the cave. Feeling somewhat irritated by the interruption, she rose and, still carrying it, went to see who it was. As she came nearer the entrance, she was able to make out the words that whoever it was shouting. "Dragon, come out and fight! Fight for Princess Cimarine of Linderwall!" "Oh, honestly," Cimarine muttered, and quickened her step. "Hey, you," she said as she came out into the sunlight. Then she had to duck as a spear flashed through the air over her head. "Hey, stop!" she cried. "I'm Cimarine." "You are," said a doubtful voice. Are you sure? I mean—" Cimarine raised her head cautiously and squinted. It was still fairly early in the morning, and the sun was in back of the person standing outside the cave, so it was difficult to see anything but the outline of his figure against the brightness. "Of course I'm sure," Cimarine said. "What did you expect, letters of reference? Come around here where I can see you, please." The figure moved sideways, and Cimarine saw that it was a knight in shiny new armor, except for the legs, where the armor was dusty from walking. Cimarine wondered briefly why he hadn't ridden, but decided not to ask. The knight's visor was raised, and a few wisps of sandy hair showed above his handsome face. He was studying her with an expression of worried puzzlement. "What can I do for you?" Cimarine said, after several moments had gone by and the knight still hadn't said anything. "Well, if you are the Princess Cimarine, I've come to rescue you from the dragon," the knight said. Cimarine set the point of the broadsword on the ground and leaned against it as if it were a walking stick. "Thought that might be it," she said. "I'd rather not, thank you just the same." "Not be rescued?" The knight's puzzled look deepened. "But princesses always—" "No, they don't," Cimarine said firmly, recognizing the beginning of a familiar argument. "And even if I did want to be, you're doing it wrong." "What?" said the knight, thoroughly taken aback. "Shouting 'come out and fight' like that? No self-respecting dragon is going to answer that challenge. It sounds like a child's dare. Dragons are very dignity-conscious, at least the ones I've met." Oh," said the knight, sounding crestfallen. "What should I have said?" "Stand forth and do battle is the usual challenge," Cimarine said with authority, remembering her princess lessons. She had always been more interested in what the knights and dragons were supposed to say than in memorizing the places where she was supposed to scream. But the wording doesn't have to be exact as long as it's suitably formal. You're new at this, aren't you? It was going to be my first big quest, the knight said gloomily. You're sure you don't want to be rescued? Quite sure, Cimmerian said. I like living with Cazul. You like? The knight stared at her for a moment. Then his expression cleared and he said, Of course! Dragons enchanted you. I should have thought of that before. Cazul has not enchanted me, and I do not want to be rescued by anybody, Cimmerian said, alarmed by the knight's sudden enthusiasm. This place suits me just fine. I like polishing swords and cooking Cherry's Jubilee and reading Latin. If you don't believe me, ask anyone in Linderwald. They've been complaining about my behavior for years. I did hear something about fencing lessons, the knight said doubtfully. But knights aren't supposed to pay attention to that sort of thing. We're supposed to be above rumors and gossip. Fencing lessons were just the beginning, Cimmerian assured him. So you can see why I'm perfectly happy right where I am. Yes, said the knight, but he did not look convinced. Speaking of dragons, where's yours? Cazul's not my dragon, Cimmerian said sharply. I'm her princess. You'll never have any luck dealing with dragons if you don't get these things straight. She'd gone to the Enchanted Forest on the other side of the mountains to borrow a crepe pan from a witch she knows. She's what? Said the knight. She's gone to borrow a crepe pan, Cimmerian repeated in a louder voice. Perhaps you better get your helmet checked when you get back. You're not supposed to interfere with your hearing, but, No, I heard you, the knight said. What does a dragon need with a crepe pan? She doesn't want it, I do. I found a recipe in the library I had to try, and the kitchen just isn't equipped to handle anything but the most ordinary cooking. We're going to fix that eventually, but for the time being we have to borrow things like crepe pans and souffle dishes. You really do like it here, the knight said. Cimmerian refrained from replying that this was what she had been trying to tell him all along, and instead said, How did you know where I was? Things get around. The knight waved a hand in a vague manner. In fact, I had to hurry to make sure I was the first. Half the kingdom of Linderwald and a princess's hand in marriage is a reward rich enough to tempt a lot of people who wouldn't normally bother with this sort of thing. Father's offered half the kingdom? Cimmerian said incredulously. That's more than all my sister's dowries put together. It's the usual thing in cases like this, the knight said mildly. It would be, Cimmerian said in tones of deep disgust. Well, at least you can go back and tell them I don't want to be rescued. Maybe that'll keep anyone else from coming up here. I can't do that, the knight said. It's just not done, Cimmerian finished. I understand perfectly. She gave him a polite farewell, more because she had been brought up well than because she felt like being polite, and sent him on his way. Then she went back into the cave and polished the broadsword until it was mirror bright, which relieved her feelings a little. And that's the end of the excerpt I'm going to read today, but I highly recommend these extremely fun, extremely light little books. Just a bit of summer reading. I would say like a little beach read, a take it camping read, a hanging out on your porch with a glass of tea read. They're fun, they're simple, and they're free at the Saegertown Library.